Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the Data and AI Summit. We're happy you could join us on this early morning. There's a lot of great events and sessions planned for you today, so I hope you get to enjoy all of it. And I hope everyone's had a chance to have their morning coffee. Some of us have, some of us haven't, but I do appreciate everyone being here so early. So we have a great presentation today where we're going to walk through the State Street journey to building their security lakehouse. I'm Paul Signorelli. I'm a senior solutions architect at Databricks, and my co-presenter joining me today is Ajish George. Ajish is the managing director for State Street Security, Architecture, and Engineering. So I wanted to start off today by trying to frame the challenge that is faced by security organizations today. And so I found 2 quotes from the industry that I think really frame the size of the problem quite well. The first quote comes from Cybersecurity Insiders in their 2024 Attack Surface Threat Intelligence report, where they found that the sheer expansion of dynamics of the attack surface has made it more difficult for organizations to manage vulnerabilities, with adversaries exploiting new entry points more aggressively. And as we think about how our infrastructure surface area is really starting to expand, as companies go from on-prem to cloud or operate in hybrid clouds, and we're developing all sorts of new computer systems and data applications, I think this quote really helps bring home the degree to which that surface area has expanded, and rather rapidly. And that's followed up by a second quote from Forbes in their summary findings from Rubik Zero Labs. And Forbes found that a significant majority of IT leaders have voiced their concerns that data growth is outpacing their security capabilities. As data volumes swell, the task of protecting this data becomes more daunting, requiring more resources, advanced technologies, and innovative strategies. So the Cybersecurity Insiders quote, taken with this Forbes quote, really shows how new applications, expanding infrastructure is leading to an explosive growth in data, making it harder and harder for security organizations to understand their vulnerability landscape. So I'd like us to keep this in mind, and this is really a theme that will play out through the rest of this presentation. And let me introduce you to State Street. If you're not familiar with State Street Bank, let me provide some context. State Street is one of the world's largest and most important financial services firms. And State Street safeguards and services approximately 10% of the world's financial assets. They're a custodial bank with over $46 trillion under custody and administration. And State Street has been declared what is known as a global systemically important bank, or GSIB. And what does this really mean in practicality? It means State Street's so critical to the global economy that under no circumstance can they be allowed to fail. It's the infamous too big to fail that we were all introduced to a decade and a half ago. But it also means that State Street faces tighter regulatory scrutiny at the hands of the regulators. And the regulators aren't just interested in State Street's banking operations, they're also interested, obviously, in their vulnerability landscape and that the systems and data systems are protected, but they're also actually interested in how they're protecting those data systems. And the security lakehouse that State Street has built plays a big role in their mission to show regulators how they're securing their systems and their data. As I said, I'm Paul Signorelli, and I'm a senior solutions architect at Databricks. I work on the wealth and asset management team. I've been part of the team for over 2 years that have been working with State Street as they've built out their security lakehouse. I'm joined by my co-presenter today, Ajish George, who is the managing director of State Street Security, Architecture, and Engineering. And it's Ajish and his team that is responsible for reporting out to these regulators. And it was almost 3 years ago now that Ajish approached us with his vision to build a security lakehouse and to really upscale the cyber capability at State Street. And today, we're going to hear about how that vision has become a reality. To do that, we're going to showcase how State Street, through its partnership with Databricks, has transformed its cybersecurity operations to meet the challenges that I just presented to you a few moments ago. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll understand how State Street not only has upscaled its cyber operations, but they've done this by driving better total cost of ownership and been able to create new, innovative cyber data products and risk metrics capabilities that have empowered their security teams and their executive decision makers to deliver them relevant risk metrics to make decisions in a timely and effective manner. To do this, we're going to tell the story of their journey in 3 acts. The first act is the story of the data. And we think back to that Forbes quote about the rapid expansion of data that needs to be analyzed, right? And you think of the myriad different data sources that fit under that, you really start to realize that security data is ultimately a big data story. The second act is the story of the product innovation that Ajish and his team have been able to build with new cyber products that have given them complete observability in terms of their vulnerability and risk landscape at the bank. And finally, the third act is the story of empowering risk decision making at the bank by creating new critical risk metrics that enable executives and security analysts to make effective decisions. Before we do that, I'm going to take us on a quick preamble into the Security Lakehouse architecture so you can understand the technology that underpins the solutions that Ajish and his team have built. Then we'll wrap it up with a few conclusions. If anyone has questions after the presentation, feel free to contact or come up to Ajish or I, and we're happy to have further conversation. The Security Lakehouse. What do we mean by the Security Lakehouse? It's very simple. This is applying the Lakehouse architecture that you've all come to know to your security data. When you apply the Security Lakehouse architecture to your security data, you create a unified foundation for all of that data. And this means your structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. When you think about it, all these data formats are part of security data. Your structured data could be system login information that you need to analyze. Your semi-structured data could be firewall logs or system logs. And your unstructured data might even be things like emails or instant messages where perhaps a rogue URL that you need to track has come across your network and is found in one of those messages. So you need to be able to bring all of this data together, and the Lakehouse architecture on top of your security data enables this. So you end up with one common information platform on which you can build all of your data applications. Then when you combine this with the analytics power of the Databricks platform and our AI capabilities to optimize processing data at scale, and here we're talking about exabyte or petabyte and even exabyte data of scale, you create a situation where we can really meet that challenge by getting full visibility into our entire surface area, presenting security analysts with timely information, and ultimately expanding the organizational scope with which we can have view into our data. But beyond just getting new capability, you're also going to get better total cost of ownership. And this really comes from 3 major reasons. The first is by reducing your infrastructure spend. And this comes by reducing compute costs, reducing storage costs, and for security data, reducing data retention costs, which in regulated industries, there are significant requirements for data retention. And when you combine this with Databricks' decoupling of compute and storage, you create a situation where you can have access to all of this security data. You can run analysis across years of security data without having to retain that in more expensive analytic systems, such as something like Splunk, right? And you can then access this data on demand as needed. The second way you lower TCO is by improving collaboration across your security teams and across your organization. You no longer have to silo data. We no longer have to copy data out and move it from one system to the other. All of the data personas can collaborate on top of the same data set, on top of a common information model, and allow security, data scientists to run, compute-intensive algorithms, or data analysts to do the same, at the same time allowing, regulators or allowing other people in the bank to consume that data without them battling for resources. And that all leads to an acceleration in value realization by enabling new capability and being able to deliver timely data horizontally and vertically across the organization. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Ajish, and he's going to walk you through what he and his team have been able to build at State Street.
Hey, good morning, folks. We're going to get into Act 1, which is the story of the data. So I came to the cyber world from a career in data engineering, data science. I tended to look at cyber problems with an outsider's lens, and I looked at the problems we were having with SIM and security operations and said, hey, this is a natural, almost beautiful fit for data technologies that we've been using in the industry for years, right? What do I mean by that? We have hundreds of thousands of systems spread out globally across the enterprise from which we need to bring in data, right? So usually that takes the shape of logs. These are semi-structured, sometimes well-formatted, sometimes poorly formatted sources of telemetry that enable our security operations teams to understand what threats are active in our environment, right? We have other sources that are more structured that are used to enrich those logs. They could be stores of identity, stores of asset information. We need to centralize all of this information and provide a unified way for our security operations team to query these, sometimes in near real time, sometimes with lookbacks that go over years, right? We have use cases that go from detection engineering, which is near real-time understanding of, hey, what threats are actually popping up in your ecosystem at any given point. We have use cases like behavioral analytics and fraud analytics. We have use cases like forensics. Hey, after the boom, how do you figure out what happened, who done it? We have use cases like threat hunting. Hey, the industry is concerned about these particular indicators of compromise. Can you go look to see if we've seen these signals across the petabytes of data that we're required to store, right? The security data tends to be the usage is spiky, is how I would put it, right? As data comes in, you run all of your near real-time detections against it. So search-based systems became the dominant pattern for SIM implementation. You have tools like Splunk, Elasticsearch, newer tools like Sentinel that are employed for these use cases. They do a lot of search indexing. That tends to be very expensive, right? You also have this long tail of other use cases. When you're talking about forensics, when you're talking about threat hunting, they typically leverage years and years worth of data that are sitting in your SIM systems. Those systems typically don't decouple the storage from the compute, and they struggle to churn over even weeks of data, let alone months or years, right? So we looked at this problem as something that was a natural fit for Lakehouse architectures. How do we bring all this data into a platform that allows us to scale out storage, reduce the cost? So we were looking at the growth of our SIM platform. We saw that, hey, we were ingesting somewhere close to 50 terabytes of data a day. And that number was projected to double and triple as we expanded our IT ecosystem to cover new cloud footprints. The enterprise was going on a massive cloud journey. We had more and more requirements to do more detailed logging, log analysis, a lot of it driven by compliance, but a lot of it also driven by security use cases that were emergent, right? So how do we essentially strain the funnel of these use cases and build out a platform that's sustainable longer term, allows us to not only retain the data at lower costs to meet our compliance obligation, but also to make what we retain more useful to the teams that need to leverage them. So we set about this journey looking at, hey, how do we decouple the existing SIM architecture? It's all tightly coupled. Your agents feed into your indexers. You run your searches against, essentially hot data. And if you need to look at older data, it requires many gyrations to get these into the systems that can query them with the traditional search indexing technologies. So we looked at decoupling this architecture, basically breaking up the routing layer from the storage layers. We kept our SIM for near real-time search indexing because there's a whole host of use cases and teams that use that for their daily bread and butter. We didn't want to essentially take away the lifeblood of the SOC, but we wanted to do an incremental approach where we could augment the SIM with platforms that were able to store more voluminous data that we couldn't load into our existing platforms, give them capabilities to go further back in history. So we looked for those incremental wins. Hey, what are the voluminous data sources where we can't meet retention requirements or wouldn't be able to meet retention requirements if we put it into the current platform? So we started with things like detailed EDR logs, network security logs, started building those out in the SIM. This had the natural effect of bringing those teams that needed those log sources into our Lakehouse, and we started partnering with them to evolve and mature those data sources. We built partnership with teams that had forensics requirements, the need to build models, things like that. So we worked with our insider threat teams to build high-risk user models. We enabled them to do detailed forensics on years' worth of data, and that unlocked another source of value for the data that was coming in. So the approach we took was, hey, solve the problems that we have now while building a platform that can deliver us sustainable value for the future, right? We also learned many lessons, right? There ain't no such thing as a free parse in the SIM world. And so we built out essentially, hey, what is the minimal processing we can do on any given data set to get it loaded? We learned the hard way sometimes that we had to retain raw data because, hey, the parses that we came up with initially were often not what the consuming teams were looking for, right? As many of you who've fought battles in the data engineering world will know, the Lakehouse architecture is really dependent on, the optimizations are dependent on your consumption. And if you don't know what your consumption looks like going in, you have to be able to transform it on the fly, right? We've been talking to some people that are looking at, the shaping of the data after the fact or shaping of the data on load, right? So we're looking at all of these approaches as we're building out this platform, right? So that's our SIM journey. The SIM journey is continuing. We are seeing all of these teams that were initially afraid to jump into a Lakehouse start to leverage it actively. So we have teams analyzing cloud logs, network security logs, EDR logs within those platforms on a daily basis. They're unlocking value that they haven't found before. They're able to do things that they couldn't do in our traditional SIMs. And that journey continues. It's going to be a multi-year journey to get to target state destination as we figure out what the future of SIM holds, what the future of SOC in terms of data platforms holds. The question we had is, hey, while all of this transformation is ongoing, how else can we deliver value with our Lakehouse architecture? So we started looking at, hey, what is the attack surface that's extant at State Street? We have this massive data platform. We have to ingest, our asset inventory, our identity inventory, anyway, to enable those SOC use cases. What else can we do with this data? What are the problems that exist within our cyber organization today that we can start applying traditional ELT-based workflows, analytics processes, and reporting processes to solve problems that can't solve today. So as we started building out the unified data foundation, we looked to complement our log source telemetry with other sources of information. So as many of you may know, cybersecurity has tended to be a very tool-oriented domain. You have your vulnerability management teams who are working with their vulnerability management tools. You have your secure SDLC teams working with their set of tools. You have your cryptographic functions working with their sets of tools. Everyone's focused on a tool-based approach to compliance. And in a large organization, there are challenges with this, right? The tools are limited. The product evolution in these domains is often focused on few companies that are design partners, and it often doesn't reflect the nuances of actually doing large-scale analytics or even contexting the data to suit the needs of the organization. So we started working with some of these partner teams to say, hey, how can we use the model we've built here to deliver value to you? Like one of our critical partners was our vulnerability management team. We started ingesting vulnerability management data from the hundreds of thousands of assets across the ecosystem. So essentially feeds of millions of CVEs were coming into our lake, and the challenges they had were sometimes simple, sometimes complex, right? The simple problems were, hey, what vulnerabilities live on what assets? How can we clearly, tie these vulnerabilities back to an IT asset? How can we prioritize these things in a meaningful way? How do we then take those assets that we've reconciled with our IT asset management system and then tie them to appropriate remediation owners? How can we then ticket those issues? How can we build a feedback cycle that tells us when a vulnerability has been remediated? So as we started building the plumbing, we start finding the edge cases, the gaps, the issues, right? The visibility problems, the operating model problems that underlie a lot of large organizations today, right? Who's on first? Who's responsible for this asset? Who's responsible for remediating this type of issue? So we work with those teams to actually build custom flows, custom prioritization algorithms, custom remediation ownership algorithms that allowed us to tie our process back to the organizational context and really drive automation and efficiency in a domain that had historically relied on customization of individual vendor tools, which took a lot of cycles, Excel-based processes, and data sprawl, right? This was another thing that we found out as we were building these products that we could do with the Lakehouse was keep cyber data, which is often very sensitive, where it belonged in a secure, guardrailed, well-governed environment. So we started working with various teams. So we built out products for vulnerability management. We built out products for attack surface prioritization. We applied the same funnel. Hey, you have cyber issues across the ecosystem. We're going to build you a consolidated view of what's going on in each business unit, in each group of IT assets, in each region. We're going to build streamlined flows for prioritization, for issue ticketing, for remediation tracking, and build efficiencies across these domains. And so that's yielded tremendous dividends in terms of taking out a lot of manual grunt work, a lot of chasing that these teams used to do on a regular basis. And so we've continued to expand that to new frontiers and new footprints where this compliance-driven approach to cybersecurity can be matched with a more broad-based view of the organization's attack surface. So this type of activity actually fed into Act 3. Hey, we're doing all of this ticketing. We're all doing all of this remediation tracking. We understand our attack surface in a way that we haven't before. How can we then take all of this information and enable decision-making, not just at the tactical level? Hey, who remediates what vulnerability? Who fixes what issue? Is it done or not done? But really take all of that and build reporting that informs executive decision makers. Right? As most of you who've worked with GRC functions, compliance functions in large organizations, a lot of those processes to this day are driven by Excel spreadsheets, compliance reports, Power BI dashboards, all of this fun stuff, and the level of automation and orchestration because of the natural siloing that has tended to exist in the cyber world has been very limited, right? So we took an approach where we said, hey, we are creating the data fabric for cybersecurity here. Can we use that to surface our view of what risks are in each of these cyber domains? So we started building out reporting and visibility across all of our cyber functions using the data that we were gathering in the lake to conduct these operational functions. And that provided us a way to give executives, regulators, others that needed it, a way to consume data in a way that they hadn't had before, right? It allowed us to build organizational risk profile to accelerate audit readiness. Most cyber teams, most IT teams, most business teams in a large bank are, let's just say they're not looking forward to audit day, because that's when everyone scrambles, everyone looks for, hey, where are my Excel spreadsheets? What databases do I need to go dump data from? What tools do I need to go look for information X, Y, Z? And pull it together last minute and hope it services the request, right? We've taken some of that away by saying, hey, here is the central platform for this information. We work with our GRC functions. We work with our governance functions to say, hey, how should we be looking at this data? How can we build those metrics? How can we make it automated? How can we make the process of cyber reporting more transparent, automated, and seamless? So those are the three key ways in which we used the Lakehouse to accelerate the evolution of cybersecurity at State Street, right? One of the things we found along the way was that the Lakehouse also became a key enabler for democratizing security data. The teams that we talked about, our insider threat teams, our threat hunting teams, our vulnerability management teams, our governance functions, they not only became consumers of the products and data that we built in the Lakehouse, they became actual participants in the process. So each of those teams, we work with them, right, to bring their teams on board. They provided some of the initial analysis. They were doing research, right? They're helping us inform the next version of data products we're releasing. They're helping us evolve the security log sources. They're helping us evolve the reporting. And these are SMEs with years of experience in cybersecurity that are matched up with data scientists and analysts on our team. And they're coming in and actually using this platform to drive forward their understanding of what our cyber ecosystem looks like and inform how that translates into risk reporting, into domain-focused products for attack surface management, into evolutions of our security log landscape for threat monitoring and response.
Sure.
I'll turn it back to Paul.
I want to just thank Ajish for sharing that story with us. I think what you've been able to do at State Street with the Security Lakehouse has been really incredible, and it's been a privilege to be even a small part of that as you've built that out, and we really do appreciate the partnership that we have with State Street. So as we conclude, I just wanted to maybe highlight, once again, a few of the core infrastructure and core Lakehouse architecture components that made this possible. Starts with the unified architecture for all of your data. As we like to say, going from BI all the way to AI, all of the different use cases, all collaborating on top of the same data, which then removes the need to have data be siloed or have data be copied off so a data scientist can work on it, or to have to push data into some downstream system so it can be consumed, right? On top of that, you have your unified governance with Unity Catalog for all of this data and all of your AI assets. And these two things operating together, this unified architecture of all of your data with a common information model that's governed in a unified way, gives you a single source of truth for all of your security data. And I think you can see from the story that Ajish just shared for us, it really does open up the possibility to create a lot of great new applications and upscale your capability. And that further feeds into this ability to unify all of your data teams across this data, particularly with the multi-language capability that Databricks has. You can have data scientists collaborating with SIM analysts, right, upon data. You can have large analytical jobs running in an isolated fashion against this data, and it's not interfering with the reporting downstream that is being viewed by executives or other interested parties, including regulators. So this is another powerful piece of what's really enabling this application development and upscaling of their capability. And finally, data sharing, right? So you might need to share this data beyond the four walls of this application across your organization, or even perhaps with regulators. So having a way to securely and in a controlled fashion share this data also is what is empowering them to really get on top of this expanding landscape. So at the top of this presentation, I presented us with a challenge, right? And that was based on a couple of quotes that I pulled out from the industry. One that really articulated the challenge of the expanding landscape that you have to protect, this expanding surface area. And the second being about the explosive growth in data that's led to. And we're talking, like I said, exabyte and petabyte level data. And as we heard from Ajish, a current set of tooling that really is incapable of handling this amount of data and creates blind spots in your vulnerability landscape. So could State Street and Databricks working together build this security lakehouse that would unify all of this complex, voluminous, and varied security data, allow them to provide scalable intelligence information horizontally and vertically across the organization, providing critical risk information to the right people at the right time in a very timely manner, and ultimately accelerate their audit readiness and their organizational transparency. So as we conclude, I'm going to allow Ajish to tell us if he thinks we've been able to meet that challenge.
Sure. So at State Street, creating a cyber lakehouse has strengthened our defense posture, driven operational excellence, and reduced total cost of ownership. It's done more, right? Like by unifying our cyber data in a single, secure, scalable platform, we've streamlined workflows, enhanced resilience, empowered our teams to innovate and respond with agility. It's really disrupted the traditional model we used to use in cybersecurity. It de-siloed teams. It de-siloed processes. It allowed us to bring in automation, orchestration, and visibility into the corners of the organization where we had been challenged to do this before. It brought us a level of scale with our SIM, with our logging and threat monitoring practices, with our incident response and forensics practices that we would not be able to do without the work that went into this. This allows us as an organization to drive greater value to our clients and stakeholders while optimizing efficiency across the enterprise. That democratization was a key part of this. It brings everyone to the table. Everyone can use an evidence-based, fact-based approach to understanding what is going on with cybersecurity within our organization and create auditable, transparent data flows that allow everyone from our frontline operations folks to cyber executives to talk about the risks and challenges that the organization faces.
And thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day at Data and AI Summit.